What was a don't tell your mom moment you've had with your dad? I was a big wrestling fan as a preteen teen in the 90s. Height of WWE's Attitude Era. Sable. Every frisky teen's dream in the late 90s. Posed for Playboy magazine. My dad bought the magazine for me without me even asking. He just told me to fill up the gas tank for him while he went inside to pay, and came back with it. Handed it to me in a brown paper bag, with a "Don't tell mama. Thanks pops." Thought it was gonna be a wrestling story of some sort, but this is surprisingly better. I wanted a slip and slide when I was a kid, but it wasn't an option because we lived in a small butt apartment in the city, so I decided to make my own slip and slide at home. I recruited my little brother and we cut open a bunch of the big black garbage bags, laid them down on the floor in the hallway, lived in one of those old pre-war buildings in NYC that were long versus square, so the hallway was super long, and threw water down. Tried to slide, clearly doesn't work. My dad comes home while we are trying to MacGyver a solution. We think we're in trouble, but no, my dad comes to save the day. He taped the bags together with duct tape and along the walls with the blue tape for paint. Then we go to slide, but too much friction. My dad decides oil, so he throws down a little vegetable oil on our homemade slip and slide to help the slide part. Still didn't work, but at this point my mom is going to be home soon. So we scrap the whole thing and dad makes us promise that if we get caught we won't snitch on his aiding and abetting our crime. So in the end, no slip and slide, but it was so much fun and my mom never did find out. Just thought it was weird that her bags were gone. One day I will go on a slip and slide. Next time, use soap. I skipped school. My dad skipped work. We both were surprised when we ran into each other at home. Want to play video games was the first thing my dad asked me. Nice. He took me to see Terminator 2 in the theaters when I was 7 years old. He also let me drive around the neighborhood every now and then when I was 13, with him in the car. He was the best and I miss him. This was the shortest emotional roller coaster I've ridden in a while. Sorry for your loss, colon. They were both darting and he cheated by going out for McDonald's. I got a hot fudge sundae out of it. Later that night when he was at work, she decided it was a good idea for a cheat day too. We went to McDonald's and I got a hot fudge sundae out of it. Don't tell your dad. Blackmail them. The dog escaped. Hours of panic searching everywhere. She was just chilling in the garden, relaxing under a tree in between two bushes where it was cool. We cried, yelled out her name, went to neighbors, drive several streets in our village and eventually just gave up. We are about to call my mum when Ruby gets up from between the bushes and casually walks past us to get some water. Mum would have gone crazy if she thought we had lost her baby. My dog recently escaped the backyard. I was following him around with his chain waiting for him to tire out a bit when he jumped into someone's car. The person had left a door open while doing something. He wanted to go for a ride. That was awkward explaining to them. Both my parents grew up in lower income working class families but have done incredibly well for themselves as adults. I'm in my mid-20s and self-sufficient. I did not follow them into tech, so I don't have a lot of extra income to throw around. My dad is happy as long as I'm comfortably supporting myself and will pay for little extras in life when he feels like it, while my mom wants me to live within my means and doesn't tend to offer gifts readily. He used to try to justify it to her, but now that I'm an adult he will just help out in small ways and say just between us, and that's the end of the discussion. Basically ever since I started college, my dad has indulged me in small ways that we keep between us. A new computer when my old one crapped out during an intensive summer chem class. Transferring the cost of flights to my account when he knows it cost me quite a bit to come home and visit. Reimbursing my lost wages when I joined them on a family holiday that vacation days don't cover. Just nice things like that which are no skin off his back but which my mom thinks I should have budgeted for. I appreciate both sides. Your dad is awesome but your mom is looking out for you more than you would think. My mom didn't work but ruled the money. She'd even make him give her his debit card so he wouldn't get lunch on days when he didn't pack one. As a teen I got really into paintball and my dad, wanting desperately to connect with me and also have some serious fun, for once, joined me and my friends in our adventures. He decided one day to buy a jug of paintballs for himself. With some stowed cash, he skipped lunches and whatnot to save for it. and asked me to hide them, and if my mom found out to say they were mine. My little brother was a snoop and listened at the door to our conversation. He told on my dad. I stood my ground and insisted that they were mine, but my dad felt guilty for lying to his wife in front of me and confessed mom was going to make him return them. I gave her the cash for the paintballs right then and there. Lem tell you, that game was one of the best. My dad was an amazing player. Me and my friends loved playing with him every time. But that game, he shined. He was in my team and it felt like we were taking on the world. It was always him and I down to the end. God damn it. I love my dad. I'll never forget his smile looking at me as we mowed down the other team. I miss my dad. AWW dude. So sad. Your mum sounds like a bit of a bee if your dad can't buy bunch or paintballs to play with his kids though. It just seems really oppressive. He made me cook and supervised while my mother was in the hospital. I was 5 and ended up burning myself and almost destroyed part of the kitchen. We got takeaway. My father took me on errands that ran overly late. I was maybe 13 at the time. We were trying to get home but we were in a seedy area of town, near the harbor, and stuck in traffic. Dad has the brilliant idea to drive down a side road and then cut through an alley. I should mention we are in a 2000 Dodge Grand Caravan. Not exactly a small car. As it turns out, the alley was 2 inches wider than our car. We drove down and it was long. We can't see the end, which it turns out was because the end was blocked by a giant dumpster. So, we got to back out. Oh, and I should mention it is now dusk. The alley has dirt for a road, and it snowed so it's more mud and slush. I get out and have to guide dad backwards down the length. It takes us half an hour, and right as we reach the exit, a giant truck pulls in behind us. Welp. This is where dad and I vanish mysteriously. I sigh, but turns out just it's the trash truck for that dumpster. We get him to back out and let us return home. Dad looks at me and goes, "Don't tell your mother. Dad is dead and gone. Mom will never know." I'm so sorry. My stepdad's father had Alzheimer's and it's very obvious it still affects him some days. Both the grief and worry he might end up with it. I hope you're doing alright. Right, so a couple of years ago, my mum had to travel to the UK with her parents for medical stuff, and she'd been there a while. She began getting really exhausted and stressed out helping my grandparents with doctor appointments and crap like that, even though my uncle was like half an hour away and didn't help. About a month and a bit later she seems really exhausted. So my dad then tells me that he's planning on taking my younger sister and brother out of school for about 2 weeks so they could surprise her, but also wanted to surprise them. So what we ended up doing in the week leading up to the traveling, me and him organize a way to get the 2 of their suitcases packed by traveling to see my mum a few days before them. So we go stay with our uncle for the 2-3 weeks he'll be gone. So the 3 of us pack our suitcases with 2 weeks worth of clothes and hop into the car with our uncle, who takes us to the airport. This is when I'll let the 2 of them know the plan. They then get to London, where my dad's close friend is waiting for them and takes them to where my mum and grandparents are staying. Grandma, who's also in on the plan, brings them in as my dad took my mum out for a couple's day. When she got back all relaxed and less stressed, she sees my siblings there and according to everyone there, just started crying out of happiness. TLDR. Mum was away for a long time and was getting stressed out and was missing her kids. Dad planned and organized a surprise visit of my 2 younger siblings without them knowing till the last moment, and I was the main helper in it. It made my mum really happy to see 2 out of 3 of her kids again. That's incredibly thoughtful. When I was very little, my dad bought mom a sewing machine as an anniversary gift. He told me not to tell mom because he wanted it to be a surprise. I was so excited when mom got home from shopping that day that I blurted it out as soon as I saw her walk through the door. When I was about 7 and my brother was about 2-3, I bought our dad a shirt and necklace for his birthday with some money from my grandparents. When he walked in, my brother touched the wrapped gifts and said, "Here's your shirt, and here's your necklace, damn it kid." When I was very young, probably under 8, he would let me steer his truck or the work truck while driving down the street to our house. He may have also given me beer. I guess I should point out that these were separate events. Either way, my mom probably wouldn't have been thrilled. My dad and I both have trouble sleeping, so occasionally when I was a kid we would watch TV together if we had a bout of sleeplessness at the same ungodly hour. When I was around 7, my family and I were deeply into Miyazaki films but hadn't ventured much into any other form of anime. One night, we were both up around 3 AM and decided to watch some TV together until we got tired or the sun rose. Most of the things on at that time were infomercials, but we stumbled across some anime that had a similar style to Miyazaki, so we decided to give it a shot. 30 seconds in and boom, straight to some hardcore bondage hentai. I've never seen the blood rush from my father's face so quickly. He quickly changed the channel and shot me a look of pure terror. Nothing had to be said, not a word has been spoken about it since. My mother became uber religious when I was about 12 years old. As a result, she declared Halloween satanic and told me I could no longer celebrate the holiday. On the night of Halloween, I sat in the bathroom in my costume and put on scary makeup. My father came home from work and saw how sad I was about not being able to celebrate Halloween with my friends. My mother was working late at the hospital, so my father instructed me to gather my things. First he took me to the candy aisle of Smart and Final and told me to pick out any 2 bags of candy I wanted. Afterwards, he drove me to a local amusement park that was hosting a fright night and allowed me to ride some rides and walk through a few haunted mazes. Your dad sounds like a good guy. My dad has gotten pulled over and ticketed multiple times with me in the car. By the third one, all he had to do was give me the "don't tell your mom" look. My dad sold our old dryer on Craigslist for $125. He paid me and my sister $10 each not to tell mom, and if she asked, say he put it out on the curb and someone must have taken it. It worked for about an hour until my mom checked my dad's dresser looking for something and found a $100 bill. I still got to keep the $10. My dad confessed to her and I later told him he should have put a bit more thought into a hiding spot because he knows that mom goes through his dresser sometimes. I was visiting my dad one weekend when I was younger, and while we were out at a park doing some model rocketry stuff, one of our rockets drifted down a cliff on one side of the park we launching them at. So we went down to find it, and we did. We also found a skeleton. My dad bought me some throwing knives that were supposed to be used only at our cabin. I used them with my friends against the wall of an elementary school. The cops came. It was a pretty mutual, so we're not telling mom about this. Right, totally worth it though. I learned how to get them to stick right before we were busted. Hit the sirens, Lou. Mackie 417's at it again. When I was little, my dad wanted to show me and my brother how to shoot BB guns. So as we were walking outside, I accidentally fired it and it bounced off the wall and hit my brother in the neck. Dad told my brother, crying on the floor, to not tell mom that he was showing us how to use guns. My dad once broke a bird feeder. Its owners were P. As a result, we were evicted. We never told mom the real reason we had to move. I fell out of the raft in some rapids that my dad was guiding. He told me not to tell her after I'd been hauled back in. I managed to extort Chinese food out of him for my silence. Also that he'd made me kayak 2 kilometers after a can of beer that he dropped in the river. No beer that comes in a can be worth that. If my dad wanted to keep something from my mom, he tricked me into believing she was 100% okay with it, and then claimed I was just confused about things if she found out. Mom's record player, dad wanted her to throw it out in her record collection because CDs were becoming a thing. Mom refused. Dad taught me how to play with a record player in a way that completely destroyed the needle. Then told mom he'd just shown me how it worked, and that toddler me must have thought that gave me the license to play with a record player. Restaurants, whenever dad was in charge, instead of cooking us lunch like he was supposed to, he took us to a bar. Not a good bar, either, because I distinctly remember having to wait outside or in the car while he went and checked that it was okay to bring kids in. Mum would have flipped out if she knew, especially given that at least some of my siblings were infants when this went on. Dad just told us that bars were restaurants, until grandma explained the difference to me after she told me to look for a restaurant and I kept pointing to crappy little dive bars. Then dad told me bars were like clubhouses for men and it's where daddies went when their wives weren't around. Squirrel candy when I was 2. He told me that rat poison was squirrel candy and let me feed a squirrel he trapped. Then let me bathe it with the hose. So basically, He got me to poison a squirrel and torture it while it died. Again, mom would have flipped out. Dad was supposed to be releasing the squirrels into the local forest preserve after he trapped them, which is what dad told me he'd done, but isn't what happened. Sounds like a real upstanding fellow. Oh. My dad used to travel all of the time for work, so I'd be left with my crazy narcissistic mother. He would leave me things like alcohol, weed to cope with her insanity, and repaired my window I would use to sneak out of regularly without a peep to her. He also would regularly call my high school boyfriend to get me out of there when he was home and witnessing my mom's cruelty. Mom would have no idea that's why my BF showed up. In hindsight, I deeply resent the fact that he knew something was so wrong with her and tried to pad my experience rather than letting me go live with someone else in the family. I have a wonderful aunt and grandma, or finding work that was closer by, but she is also abusive to him, so it's hard to completely blame him. But it sucked. Recently my husband and I got married and my dad agreed to pay for some of it. I haven't had much to do with them since I left home 11 years ago, so I thanked him profusely. A lot of our wedding, particularly the decorations, were based on her wishes in an attempt to reconnect and see if we could come together as a family. I fulfilled many of her expensive requests. After the fact, she reneges the offer on my dad's behalf and complains to anyone who will listen about how expensive our wedding was. It was $11,000 CDN total, and I paid for the majority of it, and how they shouldn't have to pay. I call my dad and he tells me just to go along with it and we will work it out later. The saga continues. Sorry, don't want to speak out of turn here, but your mum is a C. I'm pretty sure I was maybe 4, and most definitely should have been sitting in the back seat of the car with a car seat. But I remember my dad having a super difficult time figuring out the seat, so he let me sit in the front instead. Super difficult task for 4-year-old me, but she never found out. Even though the moment was with my grandpa, maternal, I figured I'd share this since he was the closest thing I had to a father figure at the time. Most Saturdays, my sisters, mom and I would go to his condo to help out with his household chores due to the difficulty he was beginning to have because of his health. I was around 7 or 8 at the time and was acting like a little crap, so my mom got fed up and just told me to go inside so she wouldn't have to deal with me. I go inside and see my grandpa scooping some ice cream into a bowl and he asks me if I wanted any. When I smiled and nodded, he grabbed me a bowl and put a few scoops in. After we take the bowls to his table, he says, "You got sent inside because you were acting up, didn't you?" When I told him I had, he replied, "Means you probably shouldn't have this, but I won't say anything if you don't." Remained one of the best memories I had of him. A lot of these stories have made me smile, but I'm not sure why this one made me smile more. I went to a football game in OKC with my dad as a kid. We brought his friend and his friend's son. We had dinner at Hooters and I got the magazines, pictures, whatever memorabilia I could get my 6-year-old hands on. My dad made it very simple. "You cannot tell your mom we ate here." Literally the first thing I did when we got back home was tell my mom how we went to Hooters. I thought it was hilarious. It's been 20 years and my dad still brings it up from time to time. Somewhere socked away in a drawer at my parents' house is a 1996 Hooters calendar. We entered a raffle to win a car. It was a classic MGB convertible, restored, in fire red. Ironically, our old neighbor's husband was the one who restored it. It was an awesome little car. Well, dad took me out for a spin one day and we got pulled over for speeding. The cop did let us go, because he liked the car too much. I remember that clear as day. I must have been like 7 years old. Don't tell your mother. I think I did though. I was a dumb bratty kid who couldn't keep his mouth shut. My parents divorced when I was fairly young, and they moved to different states. As a result of the distance, my mom had custody of me during the school year, and my dad got me for the summers. He had also gotten married again and had additional kids. I was 12 or 13 when this happened, so when I went to visit him, he always had at least one day a week that were just me and him days. He had recently moved to this town and he had a job with a well-known express delivery company. He drove a brown truck and delivered packages. This particular daughter day, he took me to work with him. and let me help by scanning the packages before he took them to the recipient. We got done with the deliveries really early, so he decided to take me to a local quarry he'd heard of to go swimming before we went home. The quarry was surrounded by trees and bushes, and there was a trail that you took from the parking area to actually get to the quarry. The trail isn't really wide enough for us to walk side by side, so I was a step or two in front of him. So, there's a bend in the trail, and around the corner comes this guy, completely naked except for tennis shoes, his junk swinging like a pendulum. Apparently, this quarry was a nude beach. My dad freaked out, hustled me back to the car, and took me to a different beach. On the way home, he said, "Please don't tell your mom." I didn't tell her until a few years ago. They were divorced for 35 years, got back together about 10 years ago and remarried each other. I give him crap about now, and we can all laugh about it. The first time he admitted that he still smokes weed occasionally, followed by him asking me to pack us a bowl for the bonfire. A punk tried to beat me up and take my money in the changing room at a local recreation center. I was smaller, skinnier, and less prepared for the fight. The moment he laid a hand on me, I spun around, slammed him into the lockers and used the door as leverage to hold him up and off the ground. I then proceeded to fill his face and gut with punches until my dad walked in wondering what was taking so long. He told me to put him down, and I obliged. When we were out in the car, he asked what caused the fight to go down. I explained and he was super proud. Of course, then came out the obligatory, "Don't ever tell your mom about this." Mike MacDonald got fed by an underweight skinny nerd that day. I'm sure he'll never forget it, as I certainly haven't. My dad used to work nights and come home after my bedtime. He would always watch TV and unwind, so I would sneak down and we'd watch WWF or Tales from the Crypt. My family is very religious and my mama Sita is a social worker, so she was very against most video games and movies that depict violence or sexuality. I went on a fishing trip with my dad, uncles and other cousins up to Canada. It was a trip well over 12 hours and portable DVD players were the new thing. It may not seem like much, but I watched my first PG-13 movies on that road trip. This was huge for me at the time. It probably wasn't the most risky don't tell your mom moment, but it is definitely the one I remember the most. I was the dad. It was a really crappy day outside and the wife was at work. Me and my son were bored as frick. So I decided to play some Borderlands with him on the Xbox 360. He was 5. I almost told him no to tell his mom, but then I thought that telling a 5-year-old to keep a secret from one of his parents sounded a little to molest. Why? I don't want to encourage him keeping secrets from his parents. So I just sort of hoped he might not say anything just because. Then mom comes home and asks how our day was and the boy just blurts out, "Me and dad played Borderlands and we were shooting people in the head and it was super creepy in this basement, but then I got a shotgun that shot grenades and then we blew up a guy by shooting him in the butt." It went on like that for almost a solid minute or two. Yeah, mom was pissed at me. We don't play Borderlands together anymore. Instead we play Rocket League. I built him a gaming computer. Now we play stuff on online co-op while in the same room. Some people make too big of a deal of this stuff. As long as they're able to distinguish it from reality and know that you can never do any of those things in real life, it's not a big deal. On my 16th birthday I was walking to our backyard shed to grab my bike and my dad was walking back to the house with half a cigar. He stopped me and held it up. "Want to give it a try?" I laughed and said no thanks, and then still in his monotone and deadpan stare, "It's not tobacco." 3-second pause. "No thanks dad, just going to go ride my bike for a bit." "Okay, don't tell your mom I offered you some." Love my dad. To his credit, that openness is what kept me from smoking at all of any type for many years until I finally decided to try pot this year to help with my anxiety and depression. TLDR. Dad offered me a hit from his blunt set on my 16th day. I declined. He told me not to tell my mom. My dad and I both travel a lot, separately, and sometimes things don't go so well. Stolen stuff, missed flight. That time the train I was on got stopped for a bomb threat in the middle of nowhere. We can both keep our heads in stressful situations, but the rest of our family doesn't handle things like that well at all. So whenever something bad happens and one of us needs something quick, we'll call the other person to handle it and end with "Don't tell anyone, especially mom." As far as mom's concerned, we're the happiest trouble-free travelers on the planet. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.